I'm Vanessa. Welcome back to the Solena Global Living Podcast, the podcast that's all about real stories, real estate, and the realities of life abroad. Today, we're talking about mortgages. I know not the most exciting subject, but it's a pretty important one if you would like to buy a property in Spain. And if you are a foreign buyer considering buying property in Spain, there are a lot of things that are different about the process here that you might not be aware of. So today my guest is Martine Newman, and she is a very experienced mortgage broker, and she's going to walk us through the nuts and bolts and all of the details of getting a mortgage in Spain, what to expect, what to look out for, and the timeframes for the process. So buckle up, get your cup of coffee, and let's dig into what it takes to get a mortgage in Spain. Hey, Martine, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us about getting a mortgage in Spain. Thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome. It's nice to be here.
Fantastic. So let's just start with your background real quick. So how do you help people find a mortgage here in Spain?
Okay, so my background has always been into mortgages. I started back in the UK when I left school, and I started with Lloyd's, and then I moved on to Merrill Lynch, and I've worked with Deutsche Bank as well. And then with the credit crunch in 2008, we actually moved to Canada. So I lived in Canada for 9 years, and I didn't pick up my mortgage background there, but we had an opportunity then to move to Spain because of Brexit. And then I was headhunted by a company that knew or had heard of me doing mortgages in the UK. So then I've now been working for the banks in Spain for the last 6 years.
Okay. So tell me about the company you work with and how they help foreign buyers find mortgages in Spain.
Yeah, so Mortgage Direct was founded about 20 years ago, and they started off by looking at the bigger picture. People always want to come to Spain. They want to live in Spain. They want a holiday home in Spain. It's always been a big expat community here for the English. So they then started looking into the banks and the bank criteria as to how they could help people come over and live and work here. So that's really how it started. They've grown bigger over the years. So I think we have about 25 advisors now.
Okay. And what types of products do you guys offer? I know obviously a home mortgage, but you also do construction and short-term lending as well, right?
Not so much short-term lending. It's, we do construction. We do commercial mortgages as well, and also refinancing. Now that's the whole new subject, but refinancing isn't a big thing in Spain. Once you have a mortgage, you normally see it through right to the end of the term. I know in the States, Canada, the UK, many parts of Europe as well, people will chop and change their mortgage like their credit card, but it's a lot more difficult to do that here. So not so much short term. The banks are really looking for a bit of longevity in their mortgage relationship, because they don't start to make money really on the mortgage products until about 5 years in.
Okay, so let's talk about the way mortgages are structured here, because there are some nuance. So, for example, talk about variable rates versus fixed rates and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so not all banks will consider fixed rates, and the majority of them do, but it depends on the client's income source, the currency that they're earning in, and where they pay their income taxes. So there are some banks that will lend fixed rates on, for example, USD earners. They have certain criteria surrounding this, but the banks will normally fix it for the full term of the mortgage, or the first year only. They don't have various products where you can fix it for 5, 10 or 15 years. It's all or nothing. So the fixed rate, there's no preference at the moment. There's no trend. I can't see anyone specifically requesting fixed or variable rates. There seems to be a 50-50 split.
Okay. And there are some other criteria that are, I think, a little bit unique compared to the US anyways. For example, the life insurance rider. Can you talk about that and some of the things that a foreign buyer might be surprised by?
Yeah, absolutely. So the banks here do have some really good rates in comparison to the States. So the banks know that they're competitive with the mortgage rates. However, they have products that run alongside the mortgages. And one of them is life insurance. There's home insurance. There's another bank that will do property alarms. So basically, they make their money off of selling you these extras. As per the Bank of Spain guidelines, they're not mandatory, but the banks do put a bit of pressure on you to take such products. Now, we're obviously here as brokers to remind the banks that these products are not mandatory, but they do look favorably on the application if these products are taken. With life insurance, obviously, we have to gauge age and medical history because the cost could be a lot more. Yes, that could be something that could be required.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting concept, actually. When I remember running into this when I bought a place in Andorra, and they were, I don't know, maybe they can force it. They definitely forced it in Andorra. But I mean, if you think about it, if you have a spouse and you pass away, knowing that your mortgage is paid off and that your spouse doesn't have to deal with that actually makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing is the time frame of the mortgage. So in the United States, you can be 70 years old and you can secure a mortgage. So talk about some of the age requirements in Spain.
Yeah, it's quite different in Spain. The mortgage term cannot normally go over the age of 75. We have got a couple of banks that will go up to the age of 80, but then they will start using pension income rather than earned income. As far as I understand, there's no technical retirement age in the States, but in Europe, it's generally viewed between the age of 65 and 67. So if you're kind of getting close to that age, the banks will then work on what retirement products that you have, Ks or state pensions, things like that. So you could be earning a really great income that would fit debt to income, the debt to income ratio. But if your pension doesn't match that income, then we could fall short.
So that's interesting. So let's say you're looking for a 20-year mortgage and you have 10 more years of work. They would have to factor in your 10 years of work, but then also look at what they project your income being after you've paid in for 10 more years to your mortgage, right?
Right. Yeah. So it really does depend on the bank as well. There are some banks that don't really have any criteria surrounding it, so they would not take the pension income into account. They would just work on your earned income. There are some banks that will work out that if your mortgage term goes into a third of retirement age or more, then they will work on the pension income. And if you're literally coming up to pensionable age, then they will just work on pension income. So there's different scenarios for different banks.
And that's why it's so great to have a broker who understands all of this and knows where to go and what banks will do what and can help you navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
I think another interesting difference is we don't use credit scores in Spain. So what criteria do banks look at to determine whether or not they'll lend to you?
Yeah, I'll speak about the US because it can be quite different. So the banks would require the clients to get their own credit search. This can't be through TransUnion or one of those multi-searches. It has to be through Experian or Equifax directly. And the banks, yes, they don't look at the score. They'll look at whether there's any missed payments, the general profile, any bankruptcies. And also, one thing to note is that they do take student loans into account with the debt to income side of things, because I find that I get a lot of credit searches showing student loans, but because they're not making payments right there and then, they don't see it as a debt. But the banks will take 5% of the overall balance of a student loan into account with their debt to income. So, yeah.
And what debt to income ratio are they looking for?
Yeah, so it's quite a complex calculation, but they will work on net monthly income. So they would take the tax return, and I know with the States that you can actually offset a lot of things so that you pay less tax, but it also shows less of a net income ultimately. But they take your net monthly income, and it will only work on 30% of that. And then they deduct all your outgoings, so any other mortgages or any credit cards or any loans that you have. And then whatever figure's left over is used to cover the new mortgage in Spain.
Let me rephrase that so I understand. So they're looking at 30% of your net income, and then from that 30%, they're deducting your other bills and all of that. Wow. Okay.
It's a tough calculation, but it's because of the fact that it's foreign people coming into Spain. They don't really know, they don't have the knowledge of the clients and the work. With the banks here in Spain, they'll work on 30% debt to income for foreign nationals, and they will work on 40% if you pay your taxes in Spain. So they do have that leeway for people that are living and working in Spain, whereas they're a little bit more cautious with foreign income.
Got it. Okay. So if you are interested in buying in Spain and you plan to live here full time, it might be a good idea to establish your residency and pay your first year of taxes in Spain.
Yes.
Even though you're maybe earning income as, let's say, a digital nomad, your income is coming from outside of the states, but you pay or outside of the country, but you pay your taxes in Spain, then your debt to income ratio would be 40% versus 30%.
Yeah, it could be considered at 40%. Ideally, your income needs to be in euros because they do take into account the currency as well. If your income is in USD and you pay your taxes in Spain, it is then reviewed on a case by case basis as to whether they will increase the debt to income allowance. If you're earning in euros from Spain and paying Spanish taxes, then it's definitely 40%.
Okay. And what percentage of the property value will they lend?
So they will lend, most of them will lend up to 70% of the value of the property or the purchase price, whichever is the lower figure. Some sellers will sell a property for a certain amount, but then when the valuer goes out, the valuation can come in lower. So the bank will always take the lower of the two figures.
Okay. Now, I understand that if you are a resident here and earning income here, you can do even better than 30%. You can
Mhm.
get 20% down. I actually heard of somebody who might be getting a 15% down. So those are possible, but what do you have to do to qualify for those lower down payment amounts?
Okay, so generally speaking, yes, 80 or 85% mortgages could be possible. Again, the income would have to be generated uh, in euros. They don't normally allow such small deposits for income coming within other currencies. It needs to be your first residence in Spain and not a holiday home. And the general merits of the application, because most banks here will score the application. So they have all your details, they put it into their computer, and the computer really says, what the risk ratio is of that application. So if you have a great income, no debts, you're moving here, then obviously the banks are going to look at that more favorably.
Sure. And if it's a second home and you're, let's say, a true foreign buyer with foreign income and you're looking to buy a second home and
Mhm.
finance it, what kind of a down payment would you expect to need to come
That
to the
would be a
table with?
minimum of 30%.
Minimum of 30.
30%
Okay.
down payment, and then you have 10% for purchase taxes as well. That can shock a lot of people that are buying here as well. So it's generally 10% purchase tax on the value of the property, regardless of whether you're a fiscal resident of Spain, a general Spanish resident, or even a foreign buyer. Yeah, the taxes can be, pretty steep to purchase.
Right. And so let's talk about that because there's been a lot of press
Mm.
about taxes for foreign buyers increasing. And, the headline is 100% tax.
Mhm.
So what are they actually talking about and where is that in the process of becoming law?
Yeah, so I think the thing of it is, like most governments, when the people start to complain about certain issues, and then you get this manifestation of people concerned about the fact that they can't buy their own local properties. So I think it's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction from the government. They're trying to find a way to please the people of Spain, to try and possibly look at the fact that they're listening to them. But it was my understanding that the EU, the European Union, have said that it's not going to be possible. 100% tax won't be possible because they cannot discriminate between foreign buyers and people living in and working in Spain. So there may be something in the future. I can't see that it's going to happen imminently. It has to pass through a lot of levels first. But I don't personally believe that there's going to be 100% taxes on purchases from foreign buyers.
It makes a great headline and a lot of clickbait, but no substance behind it, it sounds
It
like.
does. That's right. And I think, it's they're going to be talking about it for many months to come. Something might come eventually, but I don't believe anything's imminent.
Okay. I want to go back to something really important you said earlier, which was that the interest rates here are much lower than the States, and they absolutely are. So, can you share what kind of interest rate a buyer could expect to take if they took a mortgage this summer, let's say?
Yeah,
What are the rates?
absolutely. Yeah. So the banks base their variable rates on the Euribor, which is just over 2% at the moment. And they will also attach a tracker to that. So it will be Euribor plus say 1.2%. So the banks will all fix the rate for the first year. And then from year 2, it will fluctuate on, on the variable rate. Most banks won't do it on a monthly basis. They'll review the rate every 6 to 12 months. Otherwise, it could be up and down all the time. But that, I would imagine, they would probably fix it for about 3% for the first year. And then it would be Euribor plus, depending on your situation, maybe 1.2 to 1.5%. And that second rate is when you would start getting the discounts with the life insurance and the home insurance and the house alarm and such like. So with the fixed rates, you'd probably fix it for about 3.5% to 4%. Again, depending on the merits of your application. The better the application, the lower the rate.
Right. Okay, thanks for talking about that. And I think this is a mindset shift, especially for Americans. I can't really speak for other countries where it's fairly inexpensive for us to get into a house, but the carrying costs can be quite high. Taxes, insurance, the interest rate, unless you locked it in a few years ago, can be quite high. But here, you do pay more upfront, 10% in tax, and you're going to put more down. But the carrying costs over the life of the ownership of the house are much lower. I mean, property taxes can be $500 a year, $1,000 a year. Homeowner or community fees are much lower, even in really nice communities, they're much lower. And then let's talk about homeowners insurance. Let's say for a 500,000 euro villa, not in a flood zone, like what are the insurance rates for a home like that? Sorry, off the top of your head.
Yeah, off the top of my head. So I would say probably about 60 euros a month. Like you say, it depends on the bedrooms, it depends on where it is, that kind of thing. But about 60, 70 a month for a 500,000 euro property. But yeah, I mean, like you say, it goes so far as, car insurance is cheaper, cost of living is cheaper, bills are cheaper. So yeah, it does counteract that purchase tax.
Yeah, I think if you amortized the cost of home ownership over the course of, 10 years or 15 years or hell, just 20 years, the cost of the house, you would find that over that period, you're spending a lot less overall on property.
Yeah.
And what you are gaining equity and actually owning more of the home a lot faster than you would in the States.
Yeah. I mean, prices for property here in Spain have just gone up and up and up ever since I moved here 7 years ago. So the appreciation of the equity in the property is something to consider. Also, whilst we touch on that subject, I know, especially in the UK and I know in the US as well, is if you paid your mortgage down and you had this huge amount of equity in the property, you could actually take it out and use it for a new car or, a second property. That's not the case in Spain. So equity release in Spain is really difficult to do. So it's another reason why it's worth considering getting a mortgage, because if you put all your cash into a property and then think at a later date that you're going to be wanting to take some of that out to replenish your stocks in the bank, then it's really not that easy at all. The only way that you can do it is if you were to do any home improvements to your property, and then the bank would want proof that it's being done and that it has been done. So it might be worth starting off with a mortgage and seeing how you get on for a few years, and you can always chunk it down over the years, but don't leave yourself cash poor and house rich.
Well, I mean, especially if you're paying 3%, 3.5% for that money, what are you getting in the stock market right now in the last year?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't really make sense to lock it up.
No, that's true, because, you've hit the nail on the head there with investments. And I know a lot of people in the States do have, short-term EFT investments or money that's making money. So, you don't want to cash that in to pay off a mortgage. So yes, that makes sense.
Right. Perfect. Thanks for going through that. So when should somebody first have a conversation with you if they're thinking about buying a property in Spain?
I would almost say straight away. There's not a lot of point in looking for houses and coming to view houses or properties in Spain if you then find out you can't get a mortgage. Not unless you can buy cash, obviously. But I would say there's no harm in starting the process straight away.
Yeah, I agree. You might actually be able to afford a lot more than you think, or you might be wasting your time looking at things that you can't afford. So just having an idea. And so how much data do you need to just kind of give somebody a high level pre-qualification before they go out and start looking at property? What's that process?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a form called an affordability form, and I think it takes about 10 or 15 minutes to complete. And it will give me a lot of information about the age and financial situation of clients, income details, outgoings, that kind of thing. And then once I can run some calculations, I can then get back to them and say whether a mortgage is possible or a rough idea on budget as well, and some bank options.
Yeah, perfect. And it's just nice to know kind of what that's going to cost you. And
Mhm.
then I guess that's another point. So what are the closing costs on the financing side when you purchase in Spain?
Okay, closing costs. Generally, we have obviously the 10% purchase tax that I talked about. If you're looking into buying a new build property, there's also another tax called an AJD tax, and that's normally about 1.5%. Now, the developers and the agents should go through that with the clients at the time to give them an idea on those costs. But there's also the notary and the registration fee is normally a percentage of the value of the property. And also sometimes there's a bank fee as well. The banks do charge a fee it's like an admin fee to process the mortgage.
And is that usually on a percentage basis or a flat fee?
Yeah, it's normally 1% of the mortgage amount. If it's really high value mortgage, we can negotiate that down, but it's normally 1% of the mortgage amount.
Okay, got it. And I have a friend actually who is in the process of buying a house, and she just found out the Castral value of her house is about 350,000 above what the purchase price
Mhm.
is. And that is going to leave her with about a 35,000 euro tax bill. And uh, okay, so I have to plug this.
Mhm.
Instead of getting her own buyer specialist to work with her, she went direct to the listing agent. And the listing agent didn't bother to mention this. Why
Mhm.
would he bother
Mhm.
until they're deep in the transaction? And so now she has to figure out how to come up with another 35,000 euro to get this house. So I guess one point is this is why you don't go directly to a listing agent. You always have your own person representing you and making sure that you are protected in the transaction. But in a situation like that, do you have any familiarity with how somebody would go about negotiating that? Because clearly the value of the property is out of line with what the
Yeah.
government says it's worth.
I don't have any experience, but I think you could probably I don't know about negotiating it right now because town hall wherever the property's registered, it's going to take months to actually get any figures changed. So I suggest that she probably pay it for now and then dispute it after. But yeah, that's a very unfortunate situation to be in.
Right. And again, the reason why you always want your own representation, someone who knows the area,
Yeah.
understands the process, has been through this before, and knows what to look out for to protect your interests.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah.
also I don't know if I digress a little bit, but there's also two types of property registration, land registration. So we have urban and rustic, and it's worth noting as well that not all agents will come forward with the fact that the property could be registered on rustic land, which then can affect the mortgage. Normally, the mortgage loan to value is reduced by 10%, so it could be taken down to 60% loan to value. But that's one thing to note as well. But us as brokers, we don't just look at the financial side of things. We will talk you through the whole process and that, the things that can come up. So it's not just about getting the finance.
Right. And this is again why it's so important to build your team of experts. So the agent that, I would refer somebody to would also be in conversation with you. And if they're interested in a rural property, the two of you would be having a conversation. We would surface these things early so that we
Mhm.
don't have surprises once you fall in love with a property and we're deep inside the transaction. So, again, it's so important to have a good team that collaborates to support you and that you're not just trying to cowboy it on your own.
And it really it does take a team because, you have a lawyer and you have an agent, a mortgage advisor, there's several people that all come together that make the process a lot smoother. As a client, you might think, oh, really, do I need all these people? But we all have a niche in certain areas where, we can stop some pitfalls.
Yeah. And nobody wants a surprise when you're putting this much money into a purchase, a place you're going to live, hopefully,
That's
right?
Yeah.
And so let's go through the purchase process when somebody is applying for a mortgage. So they find a home, they negotiate, maybe even before they're ready to put in an offer. They should probably be having a conversation with you that this is the property that they're interested in, right? So in an ideal situation, walk us through how a transaction should unfold and some of the time frames people should be expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. So normally I would like to speak to clients way before they've decided on a property. But for example, if people come over and they fall in love with somewhere and the whole moment's taken them and suddenly they've parted with their money and they've paid a deposit, what should they do? Well, definitely speak to a mortgage broker because we're going to need to back up that offer with financing. Again, we'd fill in the affordability form. I could go through some banks and work out who's going to be better to offer the financing at a decent rate and really good conditions. At that point, then once we have an idea of the banks, we would then take all your paperwork and make sure that everything that you've said on the form matches within reason to what information we have. It then goes to one or several banks, depending on how the criteria works with the specific situation. And then depending on the time of year, because summer can be a bit slower, we can normally expect an offer within 7 to 10 days. And at that point, we can all relax a little bit because we know the financing is in place. At that point, then the bank will open up a bank account and then they would get the appraisal done on the property. So 7 to 10 days after that, the appraisal comes back. And if the bank and everybody's happy with it, then we then proceed to the binding mortgage documents from the bank. It sounds like a very quick process, but we are relying on a lot of third parties. So from when you make the offer to closing, it's normally about 8 to 12. It might sound like a long time, but there are a lot of processes in between. And a lot of fiesta days that the banks take off. And, especially with summer, it can all slow down a little. But generally speaking, 8 to 12 weeks.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for going through that. And who pays for the appraisal?
The clients will pay for the appraisal. So once the bank has opened the bank account, they will give the clients all the bank details, and then the clients will just transfer the money over to cover the cost of the appraisal. Actually doing it through the banks I find are a lot cheaper than if you go directly to a valuation company. I think it's because they must put so much business through certain companies that they might get the rates a lot cheaper.
Do you find that the appraisals align with expectations when you go through the bank, or is there an advantage to using an outside person?
Yeah, there can be an advantage to using an outside valuer if there's any reason to think that the property is in possibly a rustic area or an area that's not generally deemed as a tourist trap, then it could be worth getting a separate valuation done, because then at least you have an idea before the bank knows. So as soon as the bank gets the valuation done, they are rigid on the fact that they will use that valuation report. And regardless of what figure comes in, then we're all stuck with that property value. So I would say 90% of the time they all come in aligned with the purchase price, but we do get the odd one where it can come in a lot lower, especially if it's on rustic land, because meterage, euro per meterage squared on rustic land values less.
Good little nuances to understand, and again, to have your team of experts who will kind of guide you through all of that. When should somebody move their deposit money over to Spain and have their NIA in place? Should they be doing that before they're really looking at property, or can they wait?
I think it depends how serious people are about coming over and having a holiday home. If it's just something that they're toying with, there's not really any point in getting an NIE number. And I don't think NIEs are really available to anyone without a solid plan of purchasing a property. So it depends on individual circumstances. But I would suggest if this is something that you've been looking to do for a while, there's no harm in getting the NIE sorted, either while you're in the States or when you come over to start viewing properties. Sign a power of attorney with a lawyer. Now that's kind of really important, because otherwise, if any original signatures are needed throughout the whole process, you're going to be flying back and forth. Can be a long travel trip. So I suggest once you come over and find a property or even start looking, if you're serious, then get a lawyer to sign a power of attorney, get your NIE number sorted, and and then you can hit the ground running really, because sometimes the NIEs can take, weeks or months to get, depending on how busy the certain areas are.
Yep. Okay. So this is a really good point. And the other point here is you definitely want to find an attorney who is local to where you plan to buy. And ideally, they have a relationship with the real estate agent that you're working with. So these two people work really closely together. So the first step is, if you're serious, get your NIE number, make sure that you have your team, your buyer specialist and your attorney talk to a mortgage broker, understand your financial situation, and then you can start looking at property. And then when you find that property that you're in love with, you can move really quickly.
Yes.
So in terms of order of operations, that's important. And an NIE, just for anybody who isn't familiar, it's kind of like a social security number, but you end up giving it to everybody. You give it to the Amazon guy when
You
they
do.
drop off a package. It
Yeah.
doesn't have the same security
Yeah.
issues with it that we have
Yeah.
with social security numbers, but it is your identification number in Spain and it goes on everything. So that is really a first point. And then also sometimes opening a bank account can be a journey in itself, depending on what bank you're going with. They take know your customer very seriously in Spain, much more seriously than they do in the United States. In the
Mm-hmm.
United States, it's a quick little form, but they really take it seriously here. So you need to be prepared for that too. You need to have your documents in a row, years of tax returns, bank statements.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going through the immigration process, you've probably already had to gather a lot of that information, but just be aware that they're going to ask you for a lot more information. I remember feeling like I was applying to the CIA. I'm like, how much more information do you need from me? I want to give you my money.
Yeah.
What's the problem? And, it was just a new process. So get prepared to provide a lot of information and that understand that it could take some time
Yeah,
to get
it's
through.
also worth noting when you do come over, the power of attorney with the lawyer can actually encompass the signing of a bank account. So, that your lawyer, not all banks need an original signature, but there are some. So, the lawyer will have a section in there to say that they can open up a bank account for you as well. So that's important.
Yeah. And these are those things that it seems simple enough. Oh, I can open a bank account. Just let your attorney handle some of these things for you. You have enough on your plate.
Mm-hmm.
Get your team of experts and let them do their job and things will run so much more smoothly because oftentimes I remember thinking, you can get one thing done a day when you move to Spain. You can get the one stamp before they close at 1:00. And then the next day you can take this letter over here. And then the next day you can go wait in this office. I mean, it's a journey and you
It
don't
really
need to do
is.
it on your own.
Yeah, it seems to be like the rest of the world, but in the 80s, when computers weren't really here. You go into a bank account, and when I first opened up my account 7 years ago, we went in and, like you say, they literally wanted your inside leg measurement. And so we managed to open up the account, and then they said, oh, you just need to sign some paperwork. And literally, it was this amount. Like, it just kept coming off the printer. I'm like, can we not just do this digitally? Save the trees. It was quite incredible.
Yeah. And, we're sort of poking fun at Spain here, but the same thing happens in Italy. Portugal's not much different. It's just, you have to come with an understanding that the process is going to be different and the timeframes are going to be different. So just know that coming in and then you'll be less frustrated.
Yeah, but we're here for the weather, right? So
We're here for the sunshine. We're here for the great people and the good food. There's lots of wonderful reasons to put up with a little extra paperwork. It's absolutely worth it. Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything about the process that we haven't touched on that you think foreign buyers are surprised by or should really take into consideration?
I think we've covered most of it. I will just dial back a little bit on the bank account. So if you do come over and you're looking for properties and then you think in the back of your head, oh, I've got to open up a bank account. Don't do that until you've spoken to a mortgage broker, because if you open up a bank account with any bank along the high street, then it means that you then have a relationship. They see that as you having a relationship with them, and then they won't take an application from us. So as a mortgage broker, but because we put so much business through such a wide variety of banks, we negotiate the rates that the banks can offer. So if you go and open up a bank account with any bank, just because the agent or the lawyer has told you you've got to do that, it's best not to, because otherwise then that cuts off that avenue for us as brokers to try and get a good rate for you.
Perfect. That's a really good
That's the only
point.
thing that springs to mind at the moment, but obviously I'm always available on email for any questions.
Yeah, and you are so responsive. I so appreciate you. I think one kind of culture shock that a lot of people experience is the lack of response time or follow-up that you experience in Spain from all types of departments. And one of the reasons I am such a big fan of yours and why I want people to talk to you is you're on it. And you have a great reputation. You were referred to me by another agent who does a lot of business. And I know that you take really good care of your clients and you follow up. So I would say your first step, if you are thinking about buying property in Spain, is to fill out the affordability questionnaire, and I'll include it in the description below. Have a conversation with Martine. and then let her guide you, and then let me put you in touch with the right buyer specialist, and we'll build your team of experts so that this process can go really smoothly.
Really good. I know exactly what you mean about Spain, and that's why I think, like I said to you, we all have our niches, and because we're all homeowners, we've all understood the process, we've all bought in Spain and thought, what on earth am I doing? But I didn't have a team of experts around me, which would have really helped the process. I just think that it's such a great thing that we're all here, because you're not going to know which way to turn. And it can be an easy process if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it can be done. It is done every day. This process is, it works as such as it is. And you just, like we keep saying, you just need your team around you and do your part, and you get to live your sunny life in Spain. Well, thank you, Martine. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. This was a great conversation. Thank you.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
Okay, wow, that was a lot of really great information. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation and you took a lot of value from it. Make sure to fill out the affordability questionnaire and reach out to Martine if you are starting the process of looking for a property in Spain. And of course, reach out to me to get help building your team of experts. My job is to vet real estate agents and recommend the right real estate agent for you so that you can build your team of experts to make the process of moving abroad and buying property abroad a smooth and successful one. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep exploring, and keep pursuing the life you dream about. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode.